Hey everyone, Mr. Lewis here, ready to continue our exploration of industrial development in AP HuG today as we take a look at section 8.7, colonialism and industry. And yesterday, we briefly touched on the idea that the Industrial Revolution in some ways contributed to the expansion of European colonialism around the world. And a big contributing factor to that was simply the search for more raw materials, the resources that were needed to continue to drive the expansion of industrial development in Europe. And in this search for more resources, European powers are inclined to look at regions of the world that they didn't have much interest in before. At the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, around 1750, this map shows you the extent of European interest in and around Africa, and it's quite limited compared to after the onset of the Industrial Revolution. From 1885 onward, we can see that interest level spiked in European powers. And in 1884 and 1885, at the Berlin Conference, those European powers meet to agree on how they're going to divide Africa between British territory, French territory, German territory, and many others in search of things like crude oil or many of the other natural resources that exist in those countries. And it's not limited to Africa. The Europeans and Americans are also quite interested in South Asia and Southeast Asia, many other naturally occurring resources that are found in that region of the world. And in Europe specifically, you have everything from coal to natural gas to petroleum, iron ore, all of these different items that we discussed in yesterday's lecture that are used to fuel, quite literally, the expansion of industrial development. So after a couple world wars, World War I is from 1914 to 1918, World War II is 1939 to 1945, people are thinking a little bit differently about the world than they were before. And colonialism, in many ways, becomes unfashionable, distasteful for people. And so instead, decolonization begins to occur. The areas that you see on this map in red were decolonized before 1950. In purple, they were decolonized between 1950 and 1959. Green, 60 to 1969, and in pink after 1970. So in the decades following World War II, many of these countries are decolonized and declare independence in some cases, begin to develop their own national identity. From North Africa to Sub-Saharan Africa to South Asia and Southeast Asia, many countries are now, for the first time in many years, not under the control of a European power. So after World War II, things start to look a little bit different around the world. We have these organizations that are created, things like the World Bank in 1944, the United Nations in 1945, the International Monetary Fund in 1945 as well, that are not only meant to promote peace, but also development around the world, and specifically in some cases, economic development, and connect all of these economies around the globe so that everyone can benefit. And it works. Global trade booms. You can see this graph here showing us the value of global exports from 1900 up through today. And after World War II, as we get into the 1950s, 1960s, 70s, 80s, you can see this massive growth that takes place in international trade. But the question is, which countries have benefited the most? And this map is showing us a little bit about that. The map on top is a cartogram map of the world population. On bottom, we have a cartogram map of gross domestic product around the world. And you can see that many of these developed core nations in, say, North America with the United States, for example, or in Western Europe with places like France and Germany and the United Kingdom, many of these core nations are the ones that have benefited the most from globalization. And here's just another map to drive home that point. This is gross domestic product in dollars per capita in dollars in the form of a choropleth map. And the dark purple countries have the highest GDP per person, per capita. And many of those are what we would call core industrialized nations. From the United States to Canada to much of Western Europe, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Norway, Sweden, Finland, all the way over to Japan and South Korea, Australia, New Zealand. Also, a great amount of wealth in the Arabian Peninsula, much of that driven through the oil industry. So that begs the question, is it a blessing to have these natural resources or a curse? Because what we just saw is that these natural resources are needed to drive industrial development and thus the economy. But we also just saw that it was natural resources that led to colonialism in many of these countries. So again, are natural resources a blessing or a curse? Well, the answer is it really depends. If the country has a skilled labor force, an educated labor force, the technology, the political and social stability that it needs to make use of these resources, then it will lead to industrialization. It will lead to economic growth and economic development. But if not, if that government is corrupt, if there is a lack of stability in the country, it may lead to continued underdevelopment. In some cases, neo-colonialism, continued instability, corruption, civil war in some cases, and in many cases, continued poverty. So the cycle of the resource curse goes a little bit something like this. A country that is very rich in natural resources also has weak institutional governance. Because of this weak government, other groups seek to take control over those lucrative resources, oftentimes doing so through a coup. A coup d'etat is a forceful takeover of government, and with it, those resources. But these groups are often quite oppressive, and that leads to the emergence of other groups who seek to take control of the government and those resources. And on the cycle goes. Now, sometimes in the midst of all of this, we find the emergence of a transnational corporation. A transnational corporation is a company that has operations all over the globe. And ExxonMobil fits this description. ExxonMobil is a giant oil company, an energy company. And they meet the description of a transnational corporation because although they're headquartered in the United States, they have operations in dozens of countries. And they're a very influential company, not just because of the money they make, which you can see here compared to the gross domestic product of countries like Pakistan and Chile, but also because of the sheer number of countries that they have operations in. Each of these markers on this map of the world is showing you one production base of ExxonMobil, whether it's conventional drilling, like we see in green, or unconventional drilling, like we see in orange, or heavy oil drilling, like we see in purple up here in Alberta, Canada, or, as we're going to focus on today, liquefied natural gas, LNG. Papua New Guinea, listed here as PNG, is a developing country. And ExxonMobil has invested quite a bit of money and infrastructure in Papua New Guinea because of the liquefied natural gas that the country has. So this is a great test case of the resource curse. And what I would like you to do is to watch this video, and as you watch this video, answer the questions that go with the resource curse, video activity, and buzz, and see if you can connect what's happening in Papua New Guinea to what we just saw in the cycle of the resource curse. So take a look at that, finish up that activity. You have unlimited attempts, so make sure you lock in all of those points that are possible in that activity, and that's all I'm asking you to do for today. Tomorrow we will continue our exploration of development and industry. Thank you as always for tuning in. I appreciate you getting that work done, and we'll continue this tomorrow. Bye.